Hey there, welcome back to Supercharged Fridays. We are at week 164. How are you doing? If we haven't met before, my name is Sonal Behel, career strategist and founder of Supercharge. And I am essentially a job search strategist and help people who are in transition with one on one coaching, with digital courses, with content like on my YouTube channel, on the podcast, and this very live stream that you are watching. So if you're watching, come in the comments and say hello so we can say hello back. We have a juicy topic today, and I'm so excited to bring a brand new guest who's never been on Supercharged Fridays, Shelley. Before we bring Shelley to the show, I want to quickly say one thing because it's a little bit time sensitive. So the coming Monday, 13th of March, I'm starting 2 live workshops to help people who are at a point in their career where they're not able to get the next opportunity and they've had a sizable career gap. That could be 6 months, it could be longer. So there's 2 live workshops. Next week, we're going to work on a brand new resume, brand new LinkedIn, interview tips, how to deal with bias, all of that stuff. It's only 97 euros. If that is something that you're interested in, or you have a friend who could benefit from that, feel free to check this link out. It's right here, maven.com/supercharge/launch. And without further ado, I am excited to talk about mistakes. Not excited to talk about mistakes, but we need to talk about them because we think we're doing the right things. But unknowingly, we're there's some self-sabotage going on, right? So let's talk about this with Shelley. And I didn't check the pronunciation of her last name. Very bad, Sonal. Very bad. I think it's Shelley Piedmont. That would be the French pronunciation, but we will bring in Shelley. And Shelley, was that correct?
That is the French pronunciation, and the family is from there, but we just say Piedmont.
Piedmont. Welcome, Shelley, to Supercharge Fridays.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate you inviting me. This is awesome.
Oh, no, me too, me too. I'm glad we can make this happen. And we have a lot to cover. And I know, Shelley, you've got like you're super duper prepared and organized, and you have some thoughts that you want to share with us. But before we do that, in case someone is not familiar with you, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do today.
Sure. So I have a background of being in HR and as a recruiter, and I did that for many, many years. And then I decided that I kind of had done that and wanted to try something else. And so that's when I pivoted to becoming a career coach. So essentially, I'm helping job seekers with career clarity, trying to figure out what they want to do. Either they're early in their career or mid career and they're kind of stuck, don't want to continue doing what they have been, but don't know what else to do. And then just helping people best tell their stories through their marketing, their resumes, their LinkedIn, and helping people with interviewing. That's an area that I particularly like because we don't get feedback very often in interviews. So people are kind of left wondering what they should do.
Yeah.
So I like to be able to help people understand better what they should be doing in interview and practice with them.
Oh, okay. Okay. I love that. And you're absolutely right. It is very important. And we don't get feedback like these mistakes sometimes. So it's important we talk about this today because we may not know because no one's telling us that these are quote unquote mistakes that are maybe holding us back. Right. So let's talk about them. And Shelley, you've got, some ideas in your head as well. But what is the first thing that comes to your mind when you want to hard like face palm your head, face palm yourself because you're like, I thought this was really obvious, but it's not. Let's start with sort of that and then take it from there.
So, one of the things that, especially when I've talked to a lot of people, as have you, there is sort of to me, a misperception that the company that pays the most is the best place to work.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And there is this overarching thing because they pay so well, they have benefits. And because they have benefits, they have deep pockets. And because they have deep pockets, I have job security. Talk to us about where else this comes from.
Yeah. So part of it comes from just associating high salary with all those other things, making assumptions
Hmm.
that because a company pays a lot of money or pays more than market, let's put it that way, that therefore they must be the ideal place to work. Because if they're doing that, then all these other things must also be in place. And it's funny because as a recruiter, and some you may have had the same experience, because we know what our competition is, and we know a lot about the interior, the how what it is to work in those organizations. And oftentimes, not always, but often, the the company that is paying the most, it there's a reason they're paying the most.
Yeah. Yes.
They're paying them the most because oftentimes it's not as good a place to work, and they have to pay a premium to get people to work there.
Yes. Oh my gosh, this reminds me of when I was starting my career, and I was in a very well-known, very well-regarded company in at the start of my career. They paid at market. It wasn't the best, but it was, I would say, at median, maybe a little bit above median. And at one point, we were losing a lot of people. I was in recruiting, so you feel it, right, when there's a lot of attrition. And upon further analysis, we realized that we were losing people to the sort of the competition. They were the new kids on the block, and they were paying double and triple. So everyone was going there because it was like short term, right, financial gains. But I remember my boss telling me, and it was just such a long time ago, 25 years ago, and he said, Sonal, there's no such thing as a free lunch. If they're paying a lot, it's because those guys have almost, not exactly, but almost like a night shift, right? They have to come in later, and then they have to clock out at 2 in the morning or whatever. There's a lifestyle change, there's a sacrifice. And the other reason is you get in and you're not going to get promoted immediately. You're going to be flat for 5 years because they don't have those projections, that type of growth. And I was like, that is a big sacrifice, but people didn't think that because cash is king at that point of time.
That's right.
Yeah.
They don't do their due diligence
No.
often.
No.
They're enamored by that higher salary, and they don't ask questions about promotion or what that work life balance is. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, some people find out that it's not all that they thought it was going to be.
And they end up jumping ship, which is also to their detriment sometimes if they haven't been there for that long and people realize that you're not, are you really stable or not? Like, what's going on? So that's a really good point to start with. And
Mhm.
I thank you to the audience that is joining us. Feel free to bring in your questions. And if you've had a similar experience or if you have any other questions related to job search, Shelley's the person to ask. So, Shelley, this was a good, juicy one. I've just made a note of it. Mistake number one, thinking that the company that pays best is best. Maybe, maybe not. Do your homework. Don't make those kind of assumptions that can hurt you in the long term. What's mistake number two, Shelley?
So, on my list for mistake number two is that if you get a professionally written resume,
Hmm.
that is the ticket to getting interviews, that you will automatically get interviews as a result of that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So there's nothing wrong with a professionally written resume. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But it's how you're going to use it that is important to whether you're going to get interviews. The second part of that is, and I'll step back a little bit, is the process that you are going through with that writer to understand what you want to do and to be able to get the content on your resume that is going to align with what jobs you want. So those two things are really important to remember as you are thinking about resumes. So you want to first get a resume writer who is going to be doing at least some questioning of you in terms of trying to gather information about where you want to go, asking you a lot about your career so that they can put the content in that is going to be very interesting for those types of employers you're interested in. But you have to couple that with actually applying for the jobs that align with what you and your resume writer have discussed. Because if you're trying to do something totally different, then that professionally written resume probably is not going to be the ticket to get you those interviews.
Understood. So there's two parts to what you're saying, right? So the first thing you said was mistake number one is thinking you've made all this investment, hired a resume writer, which is not cheap, but you make this decision, you make this investment and you do it. You get this resume in front of you, it's shiny and new, and you think this is your ticket to landing a job, which it is not. So this is part A. That's what I'm taking away. Can you repeat what part B is related to this?
So the part B is that it has to do with how you're using that resume, where you are applying, the type of jobs that you are applying to.
Yeah.
So you need to make sure that the jobs that you are applying to align with the content that you have had the professional resume writer put on the resume. We always talk about tailoring a resume for a job.
Yeah.
So if you have decided that, and you worked with your resume writer, and let's say you wanted to do marketing.
Yeah.
And you have a resume that is really full of marketing content because that's the direction you gave your resume writer. But then you're deciding to use that to do, let's say, customer service jobs. Then it may not do what you want it to do because it's actually written for a totally different type of job.
It sounds so obvious, Shelley, but people actually do this, that they'll have a resume written for, let's say I'm looking for a professor role and I want somebody to help me to create the professor role. And at the same time, another role comes up. That resume is worthless, but I don't, as a job candidate, I forget that. Yes. Wow. You would think, duh, but it's actually a lot more common than we realize.
Right.
Okay.
So I just want to, again, I'm not saying you shouldn't get a professionally written resume. I certainly have written them, but be very clear about what you want in terms of the type of jobs, and then have those conversations and make sure that you and that resume writer are also on the same page.
Okay, got it. So that's mistake number two. And a quick recap of that is thinking that a professionally written resume is the ticket to getting a job, not true. And then not bothering to target the right jobs which align with that resume, right? Both are equally important because you can't have one without the other. So that's good. And Shelley, what's mistake number three?
So I have on here, this is one that I really try to work with my clients on. In an interview, I think most people know that it's really a good thing to ask questions at the end of an interview. I think we've kind of gotten that message out. But a lot of people don't really think about what are the questions that are important to them for them to decide if this job is going to be a good one or not. So what a lot of people do is they'll go and Google questions to ask in an interview, and they'll look at a list and they'll think, oh, that one will make me look smart. I'll ask that question. And it's not necessarily the best question for them to ask to figure out if that job is the best job for them or is the right job for them. Yeah. They're really fixated on looking smart and not understanding that it is a two-way conversation, and they really need to do some additional research, and asking the person who's interviewing is a great way of whether this particular job, the manager, the company is going to be a fit.
Can you share examples of good questions that are not specifically in the first category, which is, oh, these are the questions that make me look smart, as opposed to these are the questions that you want to ask that will also help you to land those jobs?
Sure. So one of the things I do with my clients is we go through really what is the most important things for them. I call it their needs. If the company doesn't have that, then it will be a bad job for them. Okay. So, as an example, if one of your needs is trust,
Hmm.
okay, I need to be in an organization where there's trust.
Hmm.
Then a good question to ask would be something around how trust is earned in that organization. You
Mhm.
could ask if it's a hiring manager, what are some of the things that you expect from me that you will know that you can trust me to do this job?
Okay. Okay. I think this is really good. This is not something that a lot of us have talked about. So it's not a very obvious thing to think about. It's a subtle thing that I think it adds up, right? It makes a difference. It comes together. So the mistake would be asking questions which are generic laundry list got from the internet, indeed.com, or all these blogs. But they are not necessarily helping you either to get the job or to screen the job if it's even worthy of you to begin with, because it's also at the end of the day questions that the other person enjoys answering, and then it becomes a two-way street. And I want to add here, Shelley, what you said. um, I'm not a big fan of only asking questions in the end because we wait for permission. Why not just pepper them throughout the process so it really feels like a two-way street and feels like a conversation as opposed to a classic interrogation style interview, which may or may not necessarily fall back with your own culture and your own values, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I think people are, and it can be because of their circumstances, that they feel such a desperation to get a job
Yeah.
that they're going to do everything for that employer and not think about themselves. But ultimately, we know that if you are in a bad fit job, you're going to be in the job market very, very soon.
Again, and then it's more painful.
And
100%.
it is so much more painful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and even if you have to take a job that is not particularly the best fit, it's way better to understand that going in and
Yeah.
set that expectation for
Expectations up
yourself.
front. Yes.
Yes, than being blindsided by it.
And disappointed and heartbroken, and then pay for therapy, all of that.
Yeah,
So totally,
exactly.
totally get that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to take a pause here, Shelley, because we've got some interesting questions and comments. Hey Varsha, how you doing? I see that you have a question and we're going to get into it. Varsha is a resume writer who works with military. uh, Generic resumes don't help. 100% agree with that. This is a longish question, but feel free, Shelley, to share your tip. How do you search for a job in a saturated market? You've got 10 years experience to begin with, and this could be a topic in itself, right, for a Supercharged Fridays. But give us like the 1 minute gist in terms of if somebody came to you as your client, how would you approach this immediately?
So there is some areas right now in the economy where there are a lot of people that are unemployed
Hmm.
all at once, and so they're finding it very challenging because they're in competition with so many people. Right? It's just a reality. So what I would suggest is that's where your referrals, your network,
Hmm.
that's going to help you tremendously because when you apply online, you're going to be applying with thousands of people. But if you have a referral,
Yeah.
that can help get you to the front of that line, at least to be looked at. That's for sure. The other thing I would suggest is if you are in an industry or in a job that there's so many other people, then what are some adjacent kind of jobs that might be available? And I'm going to give an example that we had just a few years ago. When the hospitality industry shut down because of COVID,
Hmm.
there were so many people out of work. But a lot of those people did find other jobs. Absolutely. And they found jobs that could use their skills, but in a different way. And so they thought about, well, okay, if I am in this type of job, what are the skills that I'm using every day? So that could be their organization skills, attention to detail, customer service skills. It could be budgeting. It could be whatever it is. And
100%.
then they thought, well, who else could use something like that? And then they started pursuing that. And many people, as we all know, the hospitality industry is desperately now looking for employees. And there are not that many people interested in those jobs because the people that were in those jobs actually have moved to something
Moved on.
else.
They've moved on. So I think there's a lot in this answer to unpack, but I think it's good that you're saying go with the low-hanging fruit, right? Doesn't have to be an uphill battle upfront. Go with referrals who can make those introductions and look at adjacent industries. I remember when 9/11 happened, a lot of the airlines, particularly the American airlines that were operating in India, they laid off a lot of people. And I remember we took them into customer service. I was hiring ton of people in customer service. They had that service mentality and they did amazing. So look at those type of opportunities. That's a good place to start. So all right, good. I'm gonna take another question here. Hey Sagar, can you guide me with a profile shift? How do you analyze when you have a good offer in terms of compensation, but your regional role is getting compromised with a single big unit? Are you able to follow this question?
I'm not sure what's being asked.
Sagar, I think I think I know where you're trying to go, but can you make it simple? And if it means asking in Hindi, I don't know if that is your native language. Feel free. I'm a Hindi speaker, and I'll translate. But it's important that we understand the question so that we don't. You're asking, you want to go to Vegas, and we're telling you how to go to Mumbai. Not going to help you, dude. So feel free to re-ask. And Varsha says, what is the message the resume summary should convey? And how different is that from what a cover letter should say?
Oh, that's a really good question, Varsha. And hi, how are you today? So your summary, let's see, summary should be like the most important things that you want to convey very quickly about yourself
Hmm.
that are going to be of interest to that employer. So that can be how you meet the requirements of the job. So that could be specific experience, specific industries, working with some well-known employers, and it can be your best accomplishments that really align with the role that you're looking for. So the summary shouldn't be long, but it should kind of be the high points. Like it
Yeah.
should be, why would I read further on this resume? There's something there that makes me think you would be a good fit. The cover letter. So the cover letter really, and I have lots of feelings about cover letters, to be
Oh,
quite
me
honest.
too. I hate them. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah.
Nobody reads them in my
So
experience. In my experience.
the problem with cover letters is often it's just a regurgitation of what you have on your resume. And for us recruiters, it's like, why do I need to read this when I can read the resume and get the same information?
Yes.
Okay. So the cover letter should be more than that. So one of the things that sometimes you can't really convey in a resume or in a summary, but you can in the cover letter, is what it is about this particular position that really you are so interested in. And you
Yeah.
can tell a little bit about, your background, the skills that you would be able to use in this job, how you could make a difference, how this kind of fits in, kind of your wheelhouse. I think you can use it that way. Obviously, if there's something additional that you want to talk about that the resume is not going to really be able to cover, that could be a career pivot
Yes.
potentially that you need to explain kind of why you want to do this position and
Yes.
kind of explain a little bit better about what you would offer. That's a good place for it. If you are a referral, that's a good place to put that in, to remind the reader that you are referred from somebody and kind of what that's about. You can include that in there. So
Yes.
that's kind of how I would approach it, maybe in a different way than the
Yeah.
summary.
Perfect. Thank you. And I think it also helps if you've been on a career pause for some time. It helps to know what you've been doing and a cover letter, because nothing, you can't put that anywhere else. Although I can also put it in a resume, but it's up to you. So, all right, we're going to continue. Adina, hi. Thanks for your question. We promise we're going to get back to it. So, in the meantime, we'll get back to the topic and we'll go because I see a few other questions. So, we covered three mistakes so far. Shelley, and bring us up to, so talk to us about mistake number four.
Okay. So this mistake is, you think that you had a good interview because your person that interviewed you was friendly.
Mm.
So people say, I had a really good interview. And when I asked them, I said, well, how do you know you had a good interview? And, they can't really say anything, but the interview seemed just really nice and friendly. And we had a
According
good
to this
conversation.
logic, I've had 100% successful, amazing interviews, all of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I when I interviewed people, and this is going back to my background. So my background was in hospitality. Well, if you have that kind of in your DNA, you're always going to make everybody feel comfortable in the interview. You're going to be friendly. They're
Yeah.
coming to my place of business, and I'm going to make them feel warm and
Welcome.
fuzzy,
Yeah.
because that's just kind of how I operated, but also because that was good for my company brand. I didn't want anybody to come in for interviews or have an interview with me and feel, that I was mean or nasty or anything like that.
Especially if you didn't like the person. It doesn't make sense to be that obvious.
Right. And so
Yeah.
you would never know from me if you had a good interview or you had a bad interview,
No.
because I was just very neutral about it, but I was always friendly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, you can't use that criteria to judge whether you had a good interview.
Can we stay here for a minute? So, Shelley, if the interviewer is friendly and Shelley says, hold on, that does not mean you've got the job, right? That wait between the final interview and the call for the offer letter, if there is a positive, that, or if it's a rejection, that wait can be excruciating. What are some signs, according to you, that an interview did go well?
So, one of the things I would tell people to do, and it's a little easier when you're in person than on video, but
Yeah.
look at the person's body language,
Yeah. The cues. Yeah.
because people can kind of cover what they say, but their
Yeah.
body language is a little bit more challenging to cover up.
Yes.
So if you see people nodding their heads, or they're leaning into you, or anything of that sort, that can be a sign that
Did
they
you use
are
did you
very.
used to do that? I'm going to pause you when you're nice to everyone, but would you lean in a little more if you were interested, or your body language was a bit more open and positive?
I probably did.
Yeah,
I'll
right.
admit it, I
Yeah.
probably did.
Okay, good. So there was a question right here. I think we read your mind. So that's an important one, and it's never, it's not over till it's over. So don't make those assumptions, especially if you thought everyone was so sweet and so friendly. Every single touch point was good. That's okay. Maybe they're like that with everyone. You're not that special. Maybe then what? So, all right.
Yeah.
And mistake number five.
Okay, let's see. This one is, you say you want to get feedback, but you really don't want to hear feedback.
No, but it's awful. It's hard, Shelley. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. So I have this great story about this. So when I was a recruiter, kind of earlier in my career, I really thought I should give feedback to everybody, that I would be doing them a good service by letting them know why they
Yeah.
weren't selected.
Yeah.
And so one time there was a gentleman who was interviewing for a role that would be outward facing, a lot of contact with clients, vendors, things like that, and was very qualified on paper. But in the interview, he came out as a little bit too aggressive. Okay. And the group of people, we all felt that that was not what we wanted to have represented. Okay. So he asked for feedback when he was rejected. And he said, I really want to know, I really want to do better. And I said, I didn't say he was aggressive. I didn't use those words.
Okay.
But I did talk to him about how he came across and how that was something that we wasn't going to work as well in this organization. Okay. This guy went off on me and he was extremely rude. He called me names, very, very angry.
Do I spell a lawsuit or no?
Well, that isn't what happened, but I will tell you what happened. So, I said, I know you're disappointed. I certainly understand that, but our decision is final. Okay. So he gets off the phone and then he goes on his computer and sends emails throughout the company to everybody that interviewed him and our CEO with long list of why we were a terrible company, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So he proved my point.
Yeah. You were actually thanking him because there was no bias as such. If the person exhibits show, don't tell, right? Like you showed it.
Right.
Wow.
So, and I'll be honest, after that, and after some conversations with my leadership team, we decided we would not
Never
provide
give
any more
feedback, no matter
feedback.
how much we care about other people. No, that is a very expensive mistake. Because person has been blacklisted forever in that company, and people talk. So that's a really bad way, right? So saying that you're open to feedback, except when it's difficult feedback, right? Except when it's negative. We all want positive. We all want compliments, but don't twist the recruiter's arm if you want feedback if you can't take it. Like in the words of Jack Nicholson, maybe you can't handle the truth. Okay. Oh my goodness. Shelley, before we continue, I'm just going to see there's a couple of questions here. There was a little bit of a philosophical question, which I'm going to sort of nudge him. Thank you for asking. He's basically saying, you got HR on one side, you got, candidates on the other side. So many people out of work, and yet people are saying there's a shortage of talent. So, right? It's a big loaded question. What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I could talk about this for a long
So
time.
Najam, you're saying, is it complex, but how much? It's highly complex, right?
It's very complex.
Yeah.
So why is there a shortage or why do HR people think that there's a shortage of talent? Okay. Because if you go to surveys, tons of surveys, HR will say that. Absolutely. And senior leaders will say that.
Yes.
Right. Well, I think that's a very complex thing. It can be that some of it can be there's emerging technologies that they need people to have background in, and there's just not a lot of people in that. So that can be very specific to something. There also, and I'll be honest, what we often find on the hiring side is when a position is posted and it has specific requirements that the people that are applying don't have those requirements. They just don't. And so, they want to hire and they would be happy to hire, but they do need to have certain things. And so a lot of candidates who are looking for jobs don't realize how many people apply for jobs that they really are not suited to do. So that's where the HR is saying that there is a gap.
Yeah.
And the other thing is many companies, unlike in the past where they would have apprenticeship programs or training and have extensive training programs, they don't really exist anymore.
Yeah.
So they need or they want to buy talent instead of growing talent.
Yeah. 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 That's an expensive thing to do. It costs them in the short term and the long term for sure. So there's a lot more to it, Najal. But in terms of, just in the interest of time, this is just, the taste of it, right? The taste test. We could do a whole conversation on it. Even that would not be enough. Even that wouldn't cover it. And there's a very interesting question here. How can you turn odds in your favor at the end of the interview, other than a thank you email?
Well, let's talk about the interview part, because that's going to be the most important part of turning that towards you. So I always say in an interview that there are 3 things that the employer is looking for. And in the interview process, they're assessing whether you can do the job. So that's going to be a lot of the questions that you're going to be asked. But they're also assessing 2 other things. And that is, are you going to fit in that culture, whatever that culture is? Are you going to fit in with that team? So they're assessing that because they don't want to have problem employees. And then the third thing they're assessing is, do you really want this job? Because every employer wants to hire people that really want to do that work because they know that the odds are then better that that person is going to be successful, they're going to be engaged, and they're going to stay for a while.
Yeah.
So the questions that you're asked and how you answer them are really kind of often hit a lot of that first that I talked about, but you need to really emphasize in how you're answering, and maybe at the end, especially why you want this job. You may have been asked about it in the interview, but it's a great time to circle back and talk a little bit about why this job is the job that would be the one for you.
Yeah.
Right? And what you would offer, especially when it comes to culture. If you do that, those 2 things, that can be helpful to kind of leave with a warm fuzzy terms of what that recruiter or hiring manager is thinking about you. And then your follow-ups show, again, your interest. So your follow-ups don't have to be extensive, and certainly don't be really aggressive about it. You don't need to email a person every day about it, but just be nice, be inquisitive, reconfirm that that's a position you want, and that will at least help them understand that, you do meet number 1, or I guess my number 3, which is that you really want that job.
Yeah. Okay. Makes perfect sense. And you mentioned culture as well. And Adina says, no, not this one. I think she made a comment about culture a little bit earlier. What is the culture of the company? It's the most often asked question, but it's your responsibility as a candidate to make it as specific as possible. So that's a really good point. And she's a recruiter as well. And she also says sharing feedback is highly, it's a very tricky thing. And Sajid is joining us from Toronto. Hi, Sajid. During a difficult dynamic markets, how do you ensure that we stand above the rest in the job search?
Well, you need to be very clear about what it is you offer. And I think it's especially important that when you have a lot of people in the type of job that you are looking for, out of work, or just, it's very competitive, you need to understand what makes you different or what makes you unique. A lot of people don't do that work.
Exactly.
to understand. I just last night was working with a client where we actually went through and made a statement, unique contribution statement for him,
Yeah.
which is what is it that he brings that no one else brings or very few
Exactly.
people bring.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that's really what you need to really think about. And then in your marketing, your resume, your LinkedIn, as you network, you really want to make sure that that message is very clear because
Yeah.
it will attract certain people, obviously, but it also will repel. And that's
Yeah.
okay because you
That's
don't want
okay.
to work there.
Yeah. You're not a pizza. You're not going to be liked by everyone. So that's okay. It
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. All right. Good. Um, and Sangeeta's asking us about your thoughts on accepting a counter offer from a current company after you've put in a resignation.
So if I understand this question, you've resigned because you have another job,
Probably have another offer, and
and
then they
then
heard, and then
your
they give
company
you a counter
counters,
offer. Yeah.
and then you
It's
want
like they
to,
woke up, right? So earlier,
yeah,
maybe she asked for a raise and they didn't agree. And now it's like, oh, Sangeeta, you're so precious. What did
yeah.
she do in this case?
Okay. So I've n- I've been as HR. I have never been a big fan of counter offers. I will tell you why. And when hiring or managers used to come and say, "Yeah, they got this offer, and we want a counter," blah blah blah. Counter offers rarely work in the long term.
Exactly.
That's why, because there was a reason that you wanted to leave the company and that you spent all that time to interview, etc. So you need to go back and think through, why was it that I wanted to leave? Does this counter offer change that?
Yeah,
Now,
exactly.
if the counter offer is, if it was all about money and there was nothing else, and the counter offer gave you what you wanted, then that probably would work out because that was the only issue.
But it's rarely about money, only money, is it?
Yes, it's
Yeah.
it's people's reason for leaving is often very complex, and there's many things
Yes.
that are involved in that. So
100%.
if you go
Yeah.
back and you say, "Well, this isn't going to change. This
Yeah.
isn't going to change. This isn't going to
No.
change,"
Yeah.
then think about it. Will you be happy in 6 months, or will you go, "No, I actually need to find another job. I really do because
Because
this
the
is not."
original reason is still there. No, that's a really good point. So, yeah, Sangeeta, I think the decision is yours to make. Shelley and I are both not fans of counter offers, and the reasons they are made are not always, in your best interest. So keep that in mind. We're way over time, but we're going through these questions. These are important questions, but we'll continue with them in a few minutes. We just, the fact that you're here is amazing. So we want to make sure that everyone who's watching, we get to your questions. But Shelly, are there any other points you want to cover with regards to mistakes?
Yeah, I have one, which was a very common one just a few years ago, which is, if you ghost an organization during the job search
Mm,
process,
mm.
don't think that they won't remember. Okay.
Yes.
So, and I know, Sonal, that
Yeah.
most, at least medium to large size and even small size organizations have applicant tracking systems.
Yes.
And guess what they all have? They have a notes section.
Yeah.
And when you ghost somebody, I can guarantee you that whoever in HR you ghosted is going to go and put a note in the note section about what happened. And if you apply again, even if it's a different recruiter, they're going to see that note section. They're going to look at that note and they're going to go, do we want to bring this person in if they've ghosted us?
Yeah. Yeah. And do not make yeah, exactly. Like the recruiter has left. I'm in the clear, or this is Amazon. They're so huge. They got thousands of employees in this particular building. They're not going to remember. That's where documentation and systems comes in, right? And just like you don't like a company ghosting you, you're not going to forget. You're going to tell your friends about it. If you're ghosting a company, the company will remember. It's their job to remember, right? I mean, then it's probably not a fit then, and it's not a fit now. Even if it was a mistake, don't make that mistake. So, good reminder, Shelley. And let's get back to the questions, and then I'm not sure if we can take all of them, but I do want to talk about this one because Sagar has come back. He's talking about a role where it's a corporate role. You got a team, so he's got the team management aspect, and there's the ivory tower, corporate telling him what to do. Then the other one is an individual contributor, lots more freedom to design how you want to make the health and safety department. He's kind of confused which one he should select. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yes. Okay. So I was an HR director, and so I actually would have conversations with people around this issue. The problem is that in many organizations, the only way to move up is to supervise others.
Yeah.
That's the path to
Yes.
making more money, getting a higher level job. But there are many people who absolutely do not want to manage others, nor should they manage others.
Yeah. And they're very talented and just the way they are.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it takes a certain person with a certain set of skills to be really good at it as being a people manager. And let's be honest, one of the biggest issues that many employees have is they have a boss who is a bad people manager.
Yeah.
And it impacts the team and impacts the individual. So here's where I think you really need to take a good look at yourself and be honest with yourself. Yeah. If you don't really feel like you have the right skills or the interest to be a people manager,
Yes.
then you shouldn't be one.
Yeah.
Because you will always struggle with that aspect of the role. And in many roles where you're people manager, that's 50% of your time doing that.
Yes. And it can be very frustrating because people can be messy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if in this case you think your skills are better suited to be an individual contributor, you would be happier doing that, you would thrive in that role, then I would say go for that.
Yeah. 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 I think, Sagar, you need to know yourself really well. There is no right or wrong here. It depends on which one you're gravitating naturally towards. And the one you think about gives you, like it gives you good stress. It gives you good anxiety. There's something called, bad stress, right? And the thought of it just, it's not for you. Don't do that just because it may look good on paper. It's not worth it. So all the best. It's a good problem to have. So let's admit that and then start from there. All right. I'm going to take the last two questions, and I want to do. I also want to summarize because we talked a lot today. This is a very sensitive one, and I want to hear your point of view. So this lady mentioned earlier about certain health conditions, and she doesn't. How does she talk about it during interviews? She's had a gap in her career because of these health conditions, both physical as well as mental, and she's now had a gap of about 4 years, and COVID obviously didn't help this process. What would be your thoughts on this?
Okay. So you are not alone. There are many people that are in your situation that have had health issues that have impacted their ability to work. And many people have gotten past that. And so they want to re-enter the workforce. And obviously they have a gap there. So there's some different things that you can do. So one is that if you were able to do things during the time when you were out of work that can still show that you have the skills, that you have the experience for the jobs that you're looking for, I would make sure that you're trying to emphasize that for the time that you had that gap. I don't know if that applies to you because some medical conditions, you just can't do anything.
Yeah.
But if that is the case, I would certainly lean into that to help people understand that you are qualified for the jobs, right?
Yeah.
As to when you talk or if you talk about that, you know, you are probably going to be asked about the gap because it's very obvious in your presentation, right? So you can sort of I'm trying to, because some of this answer is going to be dependent on the person and how you view that, how honest you want to be, etc. So generally what I would tell people is I would just say that you had some sort of medical issue that was addressed, and now you are ready to re-enter the workforce. I
Yeah.
likely would not get into anything deeper than that because it's not really relevant to whether you can do the job. And I would stick with the things that are very positive and that you can talk about in terms of the role, how you fit in. That's that. And not and minimize talking about anything that can detract from that. But you know, at the end of the day, it's really what you are comfortable with talking about. But you always have to remember, if you disclose anything about a medical condition, that can be problematic for you, because even if people are not supposed to act on that information, you can't control that they won't. And people have different feelings about different medical issues. And so you just never know how somebody is going to react to that.
And I think less is more. When it comes to these things, it's very private. So there's no, the more you share, the more you're going to sort of likely dig a hole. And it's not worth it, because once you dig, there's no way back. Particularly with details, the devil is in the details. So be very careful. And just because it's related, right, to what you were talking about, and you've had a gap. So I just want to mention this in case you missed the introduction. I'm doing workshops next week for people who've had sizable career gaps in their career. If you're interested, check this out, this link right here, and I'll put it in on LinkedIn as well. So we're we're out of time. We've got so much that we have covered today, and I see so many lovely questions. So if you're watching on YouTube, please ensure, if you can, copy paste that question from the chat to the comments. So I'll make sure at the end of the day I will answer them. And if you're on LinkedIn, I'll make sure I answer as well, because we're, there's I feel bad because we're taking lots of Shelley's time. But Shelley, I'm going to do a quick recap, and I want to hear your parting thoughts on what we talked about. So if you're just joining us, we were talking about unintentional mistakes we make during job search. We don't mean to be doing these things, but they can happen and they can sneak up on us. And Shelley shared 6, right? So mistake number 1 is thinking that the company that pays the best is the best fit for you. It may or may not be the case. Classic, those big names. And sometimes you got to watch out, because in very large companies, they pay very well. You could be a number and you're one of the first people to get laid off. So be careful. It's not all that glitters is gold. Mistake number 2 is thinking that you've got your resume sorted. That's good, and that you're all set. And that's not necessarily true. You got to make sure step 2 is in order, which is targeting that resume for the right roles. It's not going to magically happen. You have to make that happen. Mistake number 3 is asking questions that you think are sounding interesting, because you checked them out on Google, and you did a Google search on good questions to ask, but also ask questions that make you look good, and questions that open up the company a little bit more to the way you work. And Shelley gave us an example of trust, which I think if you're just watching for the first time, definitely catch the replay. Mistake number 4 is you think the interview went really well because everyone was super nice. Shelley's always been nice as a recruiter. I've been very nice as a recruiter. Poker face, you will never know if I liked you or didn't like you for the role. It's not the job to be so transparent. You'll find out later. And how do you know if you did a good job? We talked about that as well, right? So mistake number 5 was you say, yes, you want feedback, but when the feedback is a little bit difficult to handle, then it's uncomfortable, right? So be careful. This is the reason a lot of recruiters hesitate to share feedback, because it might be taken and then thrown back in their face. And Shelley shared it was a very cringe story. My God, listening to that. Oh my God, I can't believe that guy did that.
Yeah.
And finally, if you ghost a company, they remember. They remember. So, Shelley, for anyone who's watching right now, what is the last thing you want them to walk away with?
What I want to have them walk away with, and what I see a lot of people do, which I don't think is really helpful, they go into a job search. Number one thing they think about is my resume or CV, got to get that updated, and then
Mm,
I'm going to apply online, keep on applying. And
mm,
that's their sole
mm,
thoughts about job search. It is a little bit more complicated than that. And those that are successful actually do a lot of work to think about who they are, what they offer, who are the companies that are going to want that particular skill or experience. And they make sure to keep that message very consistent through all that they do. I find that when somebody does that extra work, they are more successful in finding a job that actually is a great job for them. Not just a job, but a great job. And don't you want to have the best job for you, that where you can thrive? I think you do. So I would just put in that little work, and I think you'll get better results.
yeah. And when you put in the work, it shows, because 99% of the people don't do that. It's
Right.
taking the easy way out, which is spray and pray and applying for the sake of it. But when the fit is there, and it's not a circle and a square, and it's not pushing it through, but it comes across a little bit more naturally, that's when good things happen. So amazing, Shelley. This has been super helpful. And if you're watching us on LinkedIn, please follow Shelley on LinkedIn. And, I think, Shelley, you come up with videos every single Thursday, if I'm not wrong, the cadence.
I do. I have my question of the day for
You have
Thursday.
a number of the day, which is every Monday. There is a
Um,
number, and a
mhm.
number is related to something to do with job search or careers. And obviously, you have lots of other content, but these are the two highlights for me that I remember. The number, which is relevant, which is on Mondays, and then you've got Thursdays, you've got a short video on LinkedIn, which is your very interesting cadence. So, thank you for being with us today and for sharing your knowledge with us.
Well, thank you, Sonal. It was very nice to be here. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Yeah, thank you guys for being here. And if you have other questions, feel free to go on LinkedIn, because the comments are a bit more dynamic there, and we'll make sure we check them out. Thank you for your time. It's not the same without a lovely audience. It makes it more, fun, and we know someone's on the other side watching. And hope this has been helpful. And wish you a lovely Friday and weekend.
Bye bye.
Bye.